What's the dog's name?
Max. Hey, Janelle. What's wrong with Wolfie? I can hear him barking. Is he okay?
Wolfie's fine, honey. Wolfie's just fine.
Welcome to What's Wrong with Wolfie.
Greetings and welcome to What's Wrong with Wolfie, a retro podcast dedicated to the pop culture of the 80s, 90s and zeros. My name is Jason.
And I'm Rich.
I'm Chris.
And I'm Steve.
And it's time to serve the public trust, protect the innocent and uphold the law as we discuss the Paul Verhoeven sci-fi classic, RoboCop.
We get the best of both worlds. The fastest reflexes modern technology has to offer, onboard computer-assisted memory, and a lifetime of on-the-street law enforcement programming. It is my great pleasure to present to you RoboCop.
This guy's really good.
He's not a guy, he's a machine.
All Detroit has a cancer. Cancer is crime.
Let the woman go. You are under arrest.
You better back up, pal!
Your move, creep.
What are your prime directives?
You have the right to remain silent. You have the right to an attorney.
What is this shit?
Anything you say may be used against you.
He's a cyborg, you idiot! He recorded every word you said.
You're dead. We killed you.
His memory's admissible as evidence. You're gonna have to kill it. Get in the car, for God's sake!
RoboCop, the future of law enforcement.
Sorry, I have questions about that music.
Yeah.
I was literally about to say about that.
I was like,
that was my
what?
my next line is like, so lads, listening back to that trailer, what the hell's going on with the music? Because that's Terminator, surely, right?
It is Terminator, yeah.
Like,
Well, I've been watching some interviews recently, and they did say that this was Orion's response to the Terminator phenomenon.
no, but to actually use Terminator music in the trailer,
to have the balls to just go, yeah, we're just going to use that music. Boom, there it is.
Jesus.
I mean that's some balls, and I'm surprised they got away with it.
This definitely was like an official trailer. I didn't find some like fan edit online or something and just chuck it on the podcast.
Thinking about that. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure this is an official trailer. I mean, it had the Orion thing at the beginning and everything.
I can't think of any other examples, but I do feel like music used in trailers is like a different legal area. I remember movie trailers chopping and changing music from other movies before. I can't think of any examples right now, but yeah, that's a pretty egregious example.
Wow.
I think James Horner holds a record, I think, for the most of his music used in trailers through the 90s and early 2000s. It's really weird, isn't it? Like, they just... But then I suppose anyone can go to a music library and pay for that right and just go, we need to use this. Okay, boom.
I mean, it's a shame in a way because, I mean, it didn't need to try and ride off the success of the Terminator because RoboCop is just an awesome film just on its own, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
So.
It is, but I guess no one knew that before they saw it, right?
No,
so you got
I
to sell it
suppose.
to the existing audience, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, in a violent, near-apocalyptic Detroit, the evil corporation Omni Consumer Products wins a contract from the city government to privatise the police force. To test their crime-eradicating cyborgs, the company lead street cop Alex Murphy into an armed confrontation with crime lord Bodica, so they can use his body to support their untested RoboCop prototype. What occurs from here on is a story of RoboCop reliving memories of his past life, finding out about Prime Directive 4 and seeking revenge on Bodica and the Omni Corporation. And Rich, I'll come around and ask each of you the same questions. Just like, tell us your RoboCop stories.
Oh, man, I'm pretty sure this is one of those things I first watched on TV. I think it must have been at ITV. I could be wrong because I usually think I rent these films out when I first see them, but there's something about so many scenes in this film that I never saw until many years later, specifically Murphy's death, and just how fucking graphic that was.
Yeah.
And when I first saw it uncut, I was like, Jesus. So unless they were editing the rental tapes of the rental market, I don't know. But what I saw up till a certain point was definitely heavily sanitized. But even at the time, I think even what there was in the version I first saw, I think this was my first real foray into ultra-violent kind of movies. I mean, I'd already started to develop a bit of a diet on, violent films, your Predators, Terminators, Demolition Mans, that kind of stuff. And obviously that kind of was after this. But RoboCop was the first time I really it just kind of pushed it to a next level. And it's something I think we kind of associate with like Verhoeven now. But obviously at the time, impressionable, young boy, I was like, geez, this is the best thing ever. This is just perfect. And I think even then, even though it didn't resonate with me at that age, there was something I did kind of take away from some of the satirical side from it. It if nothing else, it just felt different. And even though I wasn't like laughing at, its commentary on, Reaganomics and, capitalism and, just Verhoeven giving the middle finger to all that shite, I liked it just from an aesthetic. I liked it. It had this wink and a nod, this sense of humour about it. You knew it was trying to say more than just your typical sort of macho action movies up till that point, and even after it. It just felt different. It felt a bit more comic booky in a way, I guess, because there's so much more going on than just here's your one protagonist, here's one antagonist. Mindless scenes of violence. There was just something more to it. What really stood out to me about it more than anything, it's a really difficult one, because I think I liked that this film, it was a real revenge story as well. It wasn't just this nice little slice of science fiction. It was revenge. It was a degree of body horror. It just had so many more things going on than like your action films I've seen up to that point. So, and said I've seen this countless times since. I mean, from TV to DVD, Blu-ray, I've got it in 4K now. Different cuts, things missing, things added. It's a film I always go back to at least once a year. I don't really have much love for the sequels, I'm not going to lie. Favourable, I guess, towards the remake. Somewhat. It's better than it should have been. And, yeah, I mean, so I'm rambling now, but, yeah, this film has just got so much stuff in my brain when I think about it and talk about it.
Okay.
I love Clarence Boddicker. He's just one of the most terrifying on-screen villains. Anne Lewis is fantastic. Love her to bits. I can't remember if they killed her in the sequels. I think they did. That pissed me off.
They did, yeah.
Yep, that's bullshit.
Boo.
Yeah, not happy about that.
Doesn't really count because it's RoboCop 3, so...
Yeah, the jetpack, so...
yeah. Hell.
Oh, man, what else? There's so many things. I remember as well, it's probably, a few years after the film first came out as well, but I jumped on, and we can actually go back to that trailer we listened to earlier, the music in it, also having the RoboCop vs. Terminator game and Mega Drive as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Similar in a way to this film being my first real encounter with like ultra violent, on-screen violence. That game was the first like real violent game I ever owned / played. So that was just like, whoa, it was a trip. The seeing like dudes exploding into fountains of blood and blood splatters up curtains and windows when you were like shooting people inside the flats. It's just so cool. Like, so cool. I really love RoboCop. I don't know what to say. I mean, it's not many different things I consume. I don't feel like it's a franchise that's been mined to death, surprisingly. Yes, it's had like 2 other sequels. It had a TV show that was completely devoid of violence, where you just shoot a stack of boxes and the boxes would fall on people. It's that kind of level of violence. And who can forget Commander Cash as well? That was, oh God, so cringy, so cringy. But yeah, I really love RoboCop as a character. I love Alex Murphy. There's so many things I want to say about what this film has to say. Things I'm reading into that probably aren't even there. I know there's been like essays about, is this film a trans allegory as well? Which is quite a mind trip.
And I've been that's quite deep.
Looking into that.
Never really thought about
that. Maybe we'll dig into that later or after this, because I've not heard that before. That's very interesting.
Yeah, it's a trip. So I'm going to hand over now to someone else that isn't rambling quite so much about this film, because there's so much stuff that's packed into my brain when I talk about this film. So yeah, I could go on all day. A bit like Star Trek, really. So.
Firstly, this episode of Wolfie Pod is brought to you by the 6000 SUX.
I always love the fact that it just sucks. I think it's so beautiful.
The 6,000 sucks.
Dear.
One of my favourite jokes in the whole film. I think I must have found it late one night on a TV broadcast, and to say it came along again at the perfect time of my life where I was really getting into really high concept science fiction at quite a young age, actually, believe it or not. And this film is hands down just a flawless, perfect, deliberate B-movie. And it's perfect. It is trashy, it is loud, it is super violent, the cast is on point, everything. It just, like, I don't know what else to say that Rich didn't say. I was kind of obsessed with the RoboCop film. I've still got my Battle Damage Kenner RoboCop toy actually in a box somewhere, where you can remove the chest plate with bullet holes and the helmet comes off, and yeah, I still have that and I've never parted with it. But we used to play RoboCop in the school playground at primary school. And again, and like Rich said, I had never seen the full version until I bought the Blu-ray, must have been 10 years ago or so now. And to see the unrated, unedited version that was just insane. The sheer violence and body horror, and it just hits all of the marks. Even if you're not into high concept shit or stuff, there's something in this film for everyone. And every time I watch this, like Rich, maybe once every year or two, I get more jokes because you get older and you get the satire jokes and you get the privatization jokes. Like the whole film opens with an accidental firing of a space-based weapons platform. And yeah, just within the first 10 minutes, it's just like, this is what we're doing, this is how we're going. But the cast is just fantastic. Peter Weller is just an amazing guy, and I was always obsessed with how the makeup looked in this film and how they put Peter Weller into that suit. It's just gorgeous. It's just flawless. And where they blend his skin in by making like it's sort of stretched over the mechanical parts to keep the organic parts. It's just, and yeah, like exactly what Rich said, it just came along at a time where we were being exposed to super violent films. It didn't turn us into mass murdering fuckheads
that we know of.
No. And yeah, we were watching stuff that we shouldn't be watching, and it's just great. It's entertaining, and the music is fantastic, and it's real beat behind it, and yeah, it is just a great film. And I think we'll go into it in more detail as we record.
Yeah, so I also really love this film. I would say easily, very, very comfortably, one of my favourite films of all time. I first saw this on VHS cassette in the early 90s. I had a friend whose dad exposed him to films that he should not have seen at his age. And
I think there's a pattern emerging here with all
and he liked it. Well, my parents would not have let me watch this film, but I used to go around to his house and I would secretly, he showed me the early Peter Jackson films like Bad Taste and Brain Dead and stuff. And in hindsight, I feel like, he shouldn't have been watching those either. And I feel like he was like, I need to spread this PTSD around because I can't handle this on my own. Someone else needs to see this shit. So he showed me RoboCop, and yeah, I loved it, even though it fucked me up because it's incredibly violent. And I definitely used to sit in classrooms and have little flashbacks to some of the scenes in this film. But I don't care because it's one of those rare treats where you can love it as a kid for all the right reasons, and then as you get older and you keep revisiting the film, you rediscover it every time, and you're like, oh shit, this film's got stuff to say, because it wears the disguise of being a low budget, schlocky action piece of trash, and it wears that disguise proudly, and it's done immaculately. But then the real joy of this film is the fact that it actually does have layers, and it's got a lot of really good, meaty things to say about capitalism. And if a film is anti-capitalist, then I'm there. I'm here for it. It's got a lot to say about corporate culture, and also, depressingly, it's a film that only gets more relevant as time goes on. And on my most recent one, I love Paul Verhoeven films.
Yeah.
And his dalliance with sci-fi action films was too short. I want at least 3 more films from him in this genre, because I love it. I love this, and I love Starship Troopers and Total Recall. But the thing about this film that stood out the last time I watched it was the news anchors and the way they the way they shift from the advertisements, the 6000 SUX. And the chuckling about the fluffy news pieces, and then they shift into serious mode really quickly to talk about atrocities occurring all over the globe. And if you scroll Twitter, you know exactly what that feels like. Yeah. That is happening to us now. It's just incredible film. I love it.
You've all touched on the ultra violetness of the film. And, it's a Paul Verhoeven kind of trait, isn't it? We see it in his future films as well. But us seeing it at such a young age, I mean, it was such an awe-inspiring moment when we got to that scene with the shooting and just the pure violence of it all. And that is still my kind of lasting memory of seeing this film for the first time, is that, and then the scene in the steel mill, which I'm sure we'll get to, with the toxic waste. Oh,
doesn't get more 80s than that, does it?
So great.
The toxic waste mutant.
That's pure schlock, it's some freaking it's just weird trauma shit, seriously. That's what it reminds me.
It's just great. It's sublime.
Yeah, so I can't wait to talk about that a bit more in depth later on in the podcast, but just the moments that have just stayed in my brain about this film, as well as everything else you guys have mentioned, and it will always just be a film that's very special for... I mean, in the 80s, in this time period, there just seemed to be a bunch of films that just didn't really care and just went all out with the violence, didn't it? And they just didn't seem to have a barrier, was there? But yeah, and just the whole, dude turns into a machine going around solving crimes. And I always found it a bit weird. I watched it in the trailer and I don't know, RoboCop, he's so futuristic and he just jumps in an old 80s police car and drives off. And I just feel like the dude needs to be in his own super futuristic car or something.
There's actually a story behind that.
Is there?
It's one of my... RoboCop was one of my obsessions growing up. I have all these random obsessive moments in my life. They were looking for a futuristic car but couldn't find one because it was the mid-80s. So I can't remember, it was a Ford... They used a Ford car that looked as futuristic as they could, so they gave it a matte black paint job and did something to the headlights or something and made it look as futuristic as they could. But also, the weird commentary was, it's based in the near future, but how much has anything changed in the past 30 years? Not much. So they kind of got away with it, and I always wanted that toy, RoboCop's cop car. Never got it. I always wanted it, and they occasionally turn up on eBay, and they're just great. It's like a proper American police car, and it's matte black, and it just looks gorgeous. Know the
price of those on eBay. So.
No,
that really stood out to me at the time as well. The concept of a robot driving a normal car.
Yeah.
But it's great. I think, from what I understand as well, they get the person who wrote the film. It's escaping me. Edward Newman. He wanted a super futuristic Blade Runner style feature, but obviously they didn't have the budget for that, so instead you've got a sort of grungy semi-future version of Detroit. But I think it super works. It feels like it is Detroit before technology explodes into a Blade Runner future, right? It's like the precursor to things being really nuts in terms of technology, and I think that sort of grungy dystopian future really, really works.
Well, I think it grounds it a lot more, and I think it makes the commentary, the whole message about capitalism way more impactful instead of it just being this completely Hollywood sci-fi landscape, just something you can't actually relate to. It's just enough futuristic enough, but it's still contemporary, where it's whether it's the 80s, whether it's even now to an extent, it looks familiar, it looks relatable.
Yeah.
And it just feels really, really grounded. And I think it gives the message a lot more weight. So, yeah, I'm glad I didn't have the money. Like that. Yeah.
But it's funny because these commentaries on capitalism and privateering, privatization, privatization of corporations and services and stuff like that is just, it's not just an 80s thing. These things are in films now, but I think by doing so, everyone's aware of capitalism in its horrible forms. By
all forms.
Yeah, and we're going through it now with the privatization. Yeah, the privatization of health services and doctor surgeries, and
like they talked about privatizing the police force in this country not that long ago.
Yeah, and this is the great thing. When I watched it earlier this afternoon while sorting stuff out, it's like I found myself not sorting anything out. I put it on. I think I can watch it in the background, but it's one of my favourites, and I literally sat down and pretty much watched the whole thing while looking up behind the scenes stuff that I might not have known already. But by placing the adverts in it is so, it, like you said, Rich and Steve and Jason, it normalises it to a point where you feel comfortable, and then just when you think you're comfortable and you understand what's going on, it's just, I've completely lost my train of thought. I'm so sorry.
Well, I know what you're saying, because like these days, right? Things kind of suck right now, generally speaking. But the uncomfortable juxtaposition that we experience now is usually in the form of like advertisements,
yes,
and companies shoving stuff into your eyeballs about how great stuff is, how aspirational their products are. And RoboCop, you know, totally nailed that feeling, because you've got this ultra-violent dystopian future that is just suddenly cut into with a bizarre advertisement. It's very well done.
And it's again, like Blade Runner before it, and quite a lot of films as well, by throwing that in your face, you realise that it's a tale of not tale of two cities kind of thing, but it's how the other half live. Instead of the class system, you've got the dirt poor and the super rich. And if you watch Blade Runner, there are many versions, but just watch the final cut. It's the best one. Again, you look in the poor district, and I watched a documentary, the one that was made about a year ago, was it? 2 years ago? The making of RoboCop?
Yeah.
Where they brought all the actors and producers and people in and talked about it. The dynamic is you've got people with nothing and people with everything, but the people with everything are, like Steve said, throwing all this stuff at you. You've got billboards everywhere. You've got newscasters just spinning shit because that's what they're told to spin. They're selling you a product. And exactly what this film is. It's selling everyone a product.
Yeah.
And
what is it that Bob Morton says about RoboCop? He's like, with these new, privatized police force full of robots, we predict the end of crime in Detroit within 40 days. Yeah. And you can either take that as like, that's, ridiculous sci-fi concept, or he's talking out of his fucking ass and he's a corporate stooge spouting bullshit just like they do now.
Yeah,
and it's like you're stood on a stage claiming this. All the homeless people do not give a fuck about what you're saying. Like, all you're doing is earning a return for all of your investors. You total scumbag.
Another thing in this film as well, what I find, it's kind of a random scene, but like you talk about the themes of the people that have nothing, the people that have everything, whether it's through, it's pretty much guaranteed through absolute corruption and shitbaggery. But there's in that scene, like on the gas station, like forecourt, when Emil is filling up, and he holds up the guy in the booth. But you get that really, really cool shot where it's really close in on Emil's face from like the side, and you see the like clerk in the little booth in the gas station, and he's like incredibly small in the frame, behind glass, sort of hands up against the glass. Emil's right in your face, and it's almost kind of framing it like how small the other half are, and how just completely literally dominant in the frame for us as a viewer, like Emil is, or people in his circle. And it's just really, really cool. It's almost like the guy in the gas station is almost in a cage. He's in this little booth doing his like late job. He's studying as well for his like exams or whatever. And it's just like, yeah, it's really, really clever. Like, and it's not quite as literal as some of the other stuff in it.
Yeah.
Like, be it billboards, be it, you know, actual bits of dialogue. I really love that scene. And it's something it clicked with me like years later. And I thought, yes, I think I know what they're doing there with the way that's been shot. And it's really, 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 really cool.
I was very the same with when you get the flashbacks to Alex Murphy's life before.
Yeah.
Where they're painting the police force as this kind of like down and out thing. They've got outdated equipment. They've got outdated everything. It's all old. It's all hand-me-downs.
Yeah.
What's happening now? Exactly the same is happening in our military.
And
our police
with
forces.
their Windows 98 computers.
Yeah. And what struck me was in the flashback, when Murphy goes back to his old house. And this is why I love these high concept things where you've got, again, to bring, I suppose, Star Trek and Blade Runner and stuff like that into it. It's it's the way they've done it is you can program something or someone, but ultimately love, compassion, and memories will surface and change that programming for the better. And when he's in the house and he's having his flashbacks, he starts beating stuff up. But as you look around the house, and again, like you, Rich, it was only later and, you know, probably a few years ago, maybe 10 years ago even, when I watched it, I was like, hang on a minute, is that telling us that the police in this iteration of reality are on really high, decent wages? Because the house is immaculate. It's got that free roaming flat screen that follows around the house and stuff. And it was not a eureka moment, but I sat there and I was like, is that really what they're getting at? Is the fact the police force is privatised and that's why these cops are getting paid decent money and living in decent neighbourhoods? Because that's not real. That's not the reality of this down and out cop district in rundown Detroit. It didn't. I mean, it was such a jarring difference. It not weirded me out, but it was just like I couldn't quite grasp it.
I mean, it's either that or, like, people on minimum wage now have big flat screens and iPhones, right? And they have those because the production of those is outsourced and the suffering in the production of those is outsourced, right? So it could also be that, right? People in this world should be satisfied because they have a flat screen that follows them around their house. But, you know, they get paid peanuts and everything sucks.
Yeah. And it's that corporate thing, isn't it? Like, everyone wants these things just to have the thing. They don't necessarily use the thing or want the thing. They just feel like they need the thing.
Yeah.
But Apple, take a bow.
Those struggles that Murphy has throughout the film, like this is a revenge film in the literal sense, right? In the schlocky B-movie sense. He gets gunned down and then he comes back and takes revenge. But also, like, he is taking revenge against, you know, the corporation that did that to his body and who brought him back from the dead, and he's taking revenge against that system and against capitalism, and he's saying, like, fuck you, I'm not a unit of production that you can just exploit, like literally exploit my body for your production, for your returns. And he just comes back and says fuck you and shoots that guy out of the window.
That's one of the really coldest bits in the film as well, when they're like first piecing them together, and like they say, "Oh, we saved the arm," and they just like get rid of it. Like, and that itself is so cold and horrible.
Yeah, all
like,
they wanted
was
to
his humanity, and you just like, no, bin it.
Yeah.
We want this, and he's a product, and it's just horrible.
Yeah. And that's funny. Like, I was waiting for someone to bring it up, or I was, but did someone mention Star Trek? You may not like TNG season 1 or 2, but everyone who's familiar with Star Trek needs to watch The Measure of a Man.
Oh yeah, of course.
And instantly when I realised this a few years back, I was like, actually, hang on a minute, it's the same story. A guy comes in and claims the character of Data as Federation property because he's a machine. But no, he's a sentient machine, and this is the exact same story where they have taken someone who's essentially dead, stripped his humanity, used his brain and his biological elements to put into a machine because the brain's processing power is higher than that of a computer processor. So it makes sense to do that. And The Measure of a Man is a very similar story, if not identical, where this arsehole comes over and says Data is now is a product. He is Federation property and he needs to be studied. And Data, being the logical brained android, is like, but I am property, and he says it to the captain. He says, but I am the property, and because no, you are a sentient being. You have rights. You have developed to a point where you have understanding and sentience. They can't just take you away and study you and rip you apart for spare parts and to study. And it's very similar, eerily similar to this.
I guess the only difference is Data ain't running around shooting the crap out of everybody.
No, but it's just that story of stripping someone back and beating them down to a point where you sell them as a product. So like this film does it so well, and as does the episode of Star Trek. And I'm sorry to bring Star Trek into it, but it's a very good segue into it because it just...
I think it's relevant, yeah.
Yeah, and it's that many memed and gift Picard moments where it says, isn't Federation ideals to seek out new life? Well, there it sits. And he says, I'll rest my case. And when you watch this, Murphy has the same payoff at the very end. He has all his memories back in his human heart, and they fire the CEO of ACP, and he turns around and shoots the out the window.
I love that bit so much.
Right?
Thank you.
And sorry for the C-bomb, that can be blipped out. But it was just great, because it has echoes of Isaac Asimov's writings with the laws of robotics, where artificial life form cannot hurt, harm, or dishonour its creator or owner. And they throw that into this film. They got like that law where he cannot do anything to a superior officer, and then as soon as he's fired, thank you.
Yeah. Off you pop.
Unloads a clip into him, and
your arms are going to go really long now, and you're going to fall down.
Yeah, that was fucking weird.
Puppet.
And that comes up on so many special effects videos, and you're like, oh, here we are again.
But like, I think it's a good comparison because in the TNG episode, that wanker, what is he called, Maddox?
Yeah,
he's like, yeah, but think about how much progress we can make. Like, if we kill this data, we can make lots more data, and when we can progress, and it will be beneficial to society. And he's not considering the human cost of it.
No,
and that's absolutely what happens in RoboCop. Because it's like, we're going to fucking take this dead body and bring it back to life and shove it in a robot. But it's like, think of the profits. It's going to be incredible. We're going to eradicate crime in 40 days.
Yeah, and in Star Trek Picard, that comes to bite Maddox back in the arse, if anyone's watched it. Because they have the team of robots based on data, don't they, that destroy one of the colonies and stuff like that. But it's just becomes more relevant, and I'm sure Rich will go into what you mentioned at the top of the show about the whole transition change thing.
Yeah. I feel like I've mined this. There's this YouTuber called Maggie Mayfish. She's fantastic. She does lots of like movie, television, video essays. I'm kind of a bit split about this. I'm not sure. And I think, again, like all this kind of, all pop culture, all media, it's open to interpretation. We put things into it that, might not be there, but I think it kind of, for some people, it kind of just aids with the experience. It can be a comfort. It can make things more enjoyable, more relatable. But what she's basically said about RoboCop and that whole like trans allegory is, from the outset, when you first meet Murphy, when he first enters the precinct, I mean, I'll say it, I think there is something actually quite feminine about him. His appearance, his stature, the fact that when he first meets Lewis, she's very much like his equal. She's not like your typical 80s action movie, female character. She's got attitude. Her build, they're very much equals. And then I think you go for the trauma of his murder, and then when he's put into a body that he doesn't fully recognise, he's not comfortable in, doesn't feel right. I think that's where a lot of people read into it in a different way. I mean, actually, prior to him actually being killed, there's the whole scene when he's talking to Lewis and he's doing these little gun tricks, because it amuses his son. And people have interpreted that as well of him trying to conform to a masculine role, a masculine ideal, and I was like, my brain.
I've never considered that.
Like he seemed like he was actually enjoying it, but it's this idea of maybe he doesn't fully feel comfortable with the person that he is, so he's trying to fit into a certain role, and then when he ultimately becomes RoboCop, he's in this different body. When he first encounters Lewis again, when he's actually behind the mask, he's looking at her. When she says, "Oh, Murphy, it's you," he's looking at her, but it sounds kind of nuts, I know, but that's the first kind of interaction he had with a person when he's actually RoboCop himself, and he's looking at her almost like it's a mirror. He's seeing this feminine figure talking to him, telling him, to basically remember who he is, to identify correctly and not go with what people tell him he is. And I was just like, okay, this is actually kind of nuts now. Again, I don't think Verhoeven did that, but
yeah. I mean, look, there's not a chance in hell that was any consideration during the production of the film. But like allegory does not have to be present in a text for you to find it, right? That's what happens when you sort of do a reading of any text. And I think that's completely valid reading. I think that's a really cool take.
I mean, you can say it falls apart early on, actually, because of the fact he becomes RoboCop through something basically against his will. So you could kind of say, well, actually, that's instantly where the allegory falls apart, because that happens through trauma. He's being forced into that body, whereas, some people believe that's actually the case, but they're arseholes. But yeah, it wasn't free will, to be fair. But I feel like a lot of the things that happen either side of that moment when he gets killed, I don't know. I see it, but yeah, do I think it's actually the case by design, even considered? Probably not, but it gave the film a nice new dimension. I actually quite like it. Like the way
absolutely.
I watched it the other morning. I was like, you know what, this kind of works. So,
and it speaks to the quality of the film, because it has layers, and you can do that kind of dissection and examination if you want to, and because there's a lot there. There's a lot going on in this film, for sure.
But before we move into the cast, I just want a quick chat about the effects of the film. And I went back to the cinema to see this last year for its anniversary, and I thought that most of the effects held up quite nicely. And like we mentioned before about RoboCop himself, and what a great job they did of dressing up Peter Weller with the suit, and the way they managed to have that effect of stretching his skin. So it just looked like his face was just the only part of him left on this machine. But obviously we had the machines themselves. I've got ED 20
Ed 209.
Ed 209, that's it, yeah. But that one, and Dick Jones, the guy who got shot and fell out the window with his Mr. Tickle arms.
Mr. Tickle. It's not Freddy Krueger.
That one in particular still stood out as really bad. And it was quite, there was quite a few chuckles going around the cinema after that particular effect. But for its time, I think that the effects themselves were pretty cool.
So like Ed 209, obviously stop motion. So stop motion has its limitations, and it does look dated. But with Ed 209, I sort of don't care. Like, I'm fine with it. But like you say, when Dick Jones falls out the window, that's basically unacceptable, what they did with that. And it's a real shame. It's a real shame, because it is a real blight, and it happens right at the end. So it is a bit of a, like, what the fuck? And then the credits roll, and you're like, did you see that guy's arms when he was falling out the window? Like, it looks terrible. But, everything else is so strong that you sort of have to forgive it, I guess.
It's that pulpy sci-fi film, isn't it, where the stop motion kind of helps it in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't have CG effects, and they couldn't really build it like full scale and have it really articulated. But a shout out must go to Phil Tippett's studio for that Ed 209. And again, every piston and servo and spinny thing is just meticulously engineered, and there's even some they call them garage kits, don't they, where people make them on 3D printers or resin casting. When you see someone build a kit on YouTube, you understand how complex the Ed 209 miniature puppet was, because it is just gorgeous. It's just absolutely gorgeous when you see it moving, and you're seeing all these little things moving. It's not just walking; it's got all these other things going on. These other background things. It's just gorgeous. Even watching it.
My favourite Ed 209 moment, and this sums me up, is where RoboCop lights one up outside the OCP headquarters.
Oh, it's just
that little toe spasm in. It's just a little touch. It's something you probably wouldn't get with. I mean, you'd get it with CG. Obviously, they could decide to animate that, but there's something about seeing that in stop motion. The fact they went that extra little mile to this little touch. It was quite comedic. I love that so much.
That's the point. If you read interviews with Phil Tippett when he was doing the animation, they wanted to give Ed 209 more than just a robotic. They wanted to give him a more animalistic, natural look. So
you do that. You get like the lion, like tiger roars.
Yeah,
don't you?
yeah.
And then he cries like a baby at the end as well.
Like Ed 209, when I was a kid, was fucking terrified. I was terrified of that thing when I was a kid, and part of it was because of the weird animal roars that he did. Because it was like, wow, someone programmed that robot to have animal roars, and that's frightening to me. And what the scariest scene for me was when RoboCop was running away from him, and he goes down the stairwell, and Ed 209 can't work out how to go downstairs, which is hilarious. But like when you see the foot, all the little articulated bits in the foot, while the robot's trying to work out how to navigate stairs, and RoboCop just like books it. He's just like, I'm out, peace. While Ed 209 is just like flailing around on the landing. Even though that's like a comedy moment, I still found that really scary.
Yeah, no, it gives Ed some weird edge, even though it is like that's funny. It's kind of unpredictable. You only minutes before you saw him completely destroy someone in a board meeting and be the most terrifying thing ever. It's almost like he is. Yeah, it feels like a performance. Like he is a character. Ed. It's like, fucking Joaquin Phoenix played him. You just don't know quite what to think, and it makes you very uncomfortable. So
yeah. Ooh.
I mean, and the other thing of the film that really stood out for me, as we're talking about the effects, is not just the visual effects, but the sound effects. And you touched upon it there with Ed 209 with the tiger roars that he made, but also like all the RoboCop noises, his thud as he walked. You had the thud, 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 but then you had that kind of like machine kind of gurs and whirs as well.
It's that weird like power punch sound. It just does that weird. I can't describe it. It does it when he kills Bodiger at the end, but there's a bit earlier in the film as well. Yeah, it's a really cool sound effect when he like just punches or shanks someone. So,
yeah, and it's Peter Weller's performance, right, of like being a robot coupled with obviously the suits and the sound effects, like really sell it as being an incredibly heavy, dangerous robot. What is it, 400 pounds of foot pressure he can crush in his hands? Crazy.
Yeah, something like that, I think.
Let's have a chat about the cast of the film, and there's obviously Peter Weller himself who played Alex Murphy in RoboCop. And how do you feel that he managed to portray both characters?
I think he's fantastic. It's so weird that, and it almost feels like it's an insult, but it's not. But yeah, watching him when he becomes RoboCop, I do actually kind of forget that it is Peter Weller, in that role. I almost feel like it could just be someone else's jawline. Like you really feel, and I guess in the way it works, because you think he becomes RoboCop, he loses humanity. You don't see Murphy anymore. You just see a jawline with this robotic body. But yeah, I really forget it's him doing the performance. It could easily have been, he plays the cop guy who gets massacred, and then they get some other guy in to, be the hero of the movie. But yeah, it's him, and I love him. I mean, it feels like we don't really get much time at all with Murphy, but the humanity that he has is a nice little sense of humour. The way he just kind of gets on so well with Lewis from the first time they meet. So yeah, he's just incredibly likeable, sympathetic, and yeah, obviously when he becomes RoboCop, is it quite a cold performance? Yes, but it's obviously by design, so it's not bad in any way, shape, or form. But yeah, it feels like he really is playing two characters. It never feels like there's this, until obviously later on when he actually, unmasks, you get to see some of that humanity come back. But I think the whole time he is just RoboCop doing RoboCop things. It feels like there's a real separation. So that is a credit to him. I mean, he doesn't really necessarily have to, flex his acting muscle while he's playing RoboCop, but he does such a good job at playing those two roles. And yeah, I think he's fantastic in it.
Yeah, I agree. I sort of wish that we got more Murphy before he dies, but it's a pacey film. It needs to get a move on. It's called RoboCop, but yeah, it is a real stark difference between the character of Murphy and then when he's in the suit. But he does a lot of incredibly good work, considering you only see his mouth for most of the film. But yeah, he does really, really good work. And then the scene where they take the mask off and you see his face, that's also a very disturbing scene that I remember from my childhood. But yeah, it's very well done.
What I love most about that scene in the steel mill is still to this day, we are seeing Murphy's face, current face, at the same time as Murphy does. It's jarringly shocking, and it's supposed to be body shock. It's supposed to be, what have they done, And he's remembering who he was, and it's a lovely scene because they're having this heart-to-heart with his old partner, and he's remembering what he is and who he is, and also come to terms with what he now is. And it's a lovely scene, and heads up the makeup department just seamlessly blending the stretched skin over the mechanical head.
Yeah, it's cruel is how it strikes me. Like what kind of monster does that work where they're just pinning this guy's face skin onto metal and stretching it back? Like it's cruel and horrible, and yeah.
Also, they I think they went through so many different design iterations of the suit, but by making it really disgustingly grungy engineering rather than seamless futuristic engineering, it works on such a deeper level of he's a prototype, It's rough and ready tubing and piping, and it's not perfect, which is what I'm trying to get to.
Yeah, but when he's got the helmet on, he looks perfect, right? But then you take the helmet off and you realise that it's horrible. Yeah. And it's like, what the corporation is doing. It's Omni Consumer Products. We are a big, shiny conglomerate, but then you look under the surface and it's horror.
Yeah. It's beautifully done. It's that what's on the surface isn't necessarily what's underneath commentary. It's done so beautifully well in this film. And Peter Weller's performance, I think like you guys must have said when I was off air for a minute, he went into it and apparently did these kind of like bird-like, almost reptile movements because, like we said, he could only see his mouth for most of the film. And you need to have that performance factor in your visual acting, your body language. And he did it beautifully well.
I like the way that he his body moved, turned first and then his head followed. My throat motion he has in the whole film is there's the bit when he just basically, I think it's where they're producing all the drugs, and he goes through and he just runs through a load of Bodega's men, and he does that cool like turn and pivot where he kind of turns up, and I hope you know the bit I mean, but he just kind of almost like turns on his waist and then he kind of tilts it upwards and looks, aiming the gun, and his head stays almost locked the whole time. Yeah, it's such a really cool, like, inhuman kind of motion. I love it.
Yeah, it's so mechanical. Yeah. When they said that he put in some bird-like inspired performance, you can see it, because if you watch a bird, they move their head before they walk or before they move anywhere. Peter Weller does that. His head moves and then his body moves. His head moves first, his arm moves second, and it's a glorious performance. Just watching, it's like a complex dance almost, especially in that warehouse scene, and the suit itself. Just, oh my god, that's just
love it.
I did some reading about the production of this film today, and apparently the suit came incredibly late. They didn't even know what RoboCop was going to look like because Verhoeven was very indecisive about it, and Peter Weller did a lot of like mime work to work out how he was going to move.
Yeah,
as a
I
robot.
did hear that. Yeah,
and then they put the suit on him, and he's like, "I can't do any of the stuff that I've learned because this suit is not what I expected." And they were like, "We have to shoot. We have to keep going. So tough shit." But he insisted. He was like, "No. I have to know I have to know how to move in the suit." So they like paused the production for a few days while he worked out how to move like a robot. So all of that performance that he's done, he came up with in like 2 days or something. But he just absolutely nails it.
And also, did anyone pick up the again, like the Dick Jones's, monkey arms? Again, it's gone down in, I suppose not internet folklore history, but what happens to Robo's chin strap? Chin strap?
Yeah.
There's a black chin strap that goes around Peter Weller's jaw and chin.
Oh yeah. Okay,
But when he takes the helmet off, there's no chin strap on either him or the helmet.
Terrible.
I didn't notice that until some arsehole on YouTube ruined it for me once.
I think the German soldier in Top Secret had it.
Yeah,
I was about to say the same thing.
Sorry, Steve. I think it's the same idea as me. I start your continuity there, you know. Just
Okay, well, let's have a quick chat about Kirkwood Smith as Clarence Boddicker. What an arsehole. But he portrayed him
just
perfectly,
fantastic.
didn't he?
it's terrifying.
Yeah, it inspired casting this guy because he looks like he could be an accountant for Omni Consumer Products, but because just the way he looks. But he's not. He's the muscle, and he's a sadist and a psychopath and terrifying. He's great.
I saw someone describe Kurtwood's performance. Has anyone seen that film, the Michael Douglas film, Falling Down?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh yeah.
And someone, again, as another YouTube video I watched years ago, described it as Clarence Boddicker is almost if Michael Douglas's character from Falling Down just went that little bit too far. He's somewhat blue-collar worker who's just been fucked over so many times. He's like, nope, fuck it. But just what a performance from Kurtwood Smith. And I didn't find out until watching documentaries that he'd only ever really done theatre and like bit parts on television up until this point. So I think it was a Alan Rickman situation for Kurtwood, and then he would turn up in Star Trek numerous times and would then be Red Foreman's dad in that 70s show, and that blew my mind. Totally blew my mind that he would go from something like RoboCop and these real hard-edged figures to play a dad in a 70s-based sitcom about kids.
So it was like Ken Faree from bloody Dawn of the Dead was in like Keenan and Kel. He's playing like Keenan's dad.
Yeah, but I just
broke
think
my head.
it works with the character in that 70s show because he is that blue-collar worker who's been fucked over so many times and is angry at the world. And it works. But Kurtwood Smith, just such an electric performance. Like, it's a shame they didn't plan a sequel properly because... But then he had to have his comeuppance, so it wouldn't have been in the sequel anyway if they did plan it. So, yeah, ignore that.
Can you fly, Bobby?
I love that
line. Oh, such an arsehole.
And it's just, and again, the first like 20 minutes, and you see them shooting Murphy to pieces, and he's just such a non-caring arsehole.
Yeah.
Like, and you see villains who have heart or underlying things going on underneath, but Clarence Boddicker in this film is just an out-and-out arsehole. Absolute prick of a man who doesn't care anymore.
It never feels like a movie villain. He feels like if you were in a situation in real life, flat out, like you were being murdered in real life and you were Murphy, like you're looking at this guy and you know I'm fucked because this person just does not care.
No, doesn't care about
another person.
Yeah,
like,
and he wouldn't care if he died in the process either. He's just horrible. One of those people who have got nothing else to give to life or humanity, and he's just like, whatever. Gonna kill you and walk away.
Good. So good.
Yeah. And like the Murphy's death scene, the thing that's the most disturbing about that is that like they have to kill him, right? But they're not just going to do that. They're going to do it in the most horrendous way possible. And Clarence Boddicker makes sure that Murphy suffers the most, and the cruelty is the point, and it's so unnecessary, and it's. Like, that man is truly sadistic,
But it was the torturing before the shooting. Yeah. He was getting off on it. He was buzzing. Yeah, they started with the hand being shot off and then the arm. And it's like, serial killers like Jeffrey Dahmer doing animals, isn't it? They start off with animals and then they're just natural progression up, isn't it? And he's actually getting off on torturing and then murdering this cop who was only doing his duty.
Yeah. And
he didn't care. And it's so electrifyingly scary that happens still and has always happened to people. But, oh my God, that truly scary villain played perfectly well.
And I guess it's a little bit quite worrying that, Kirkwood seems very comfortable portraying this kind of person that we all know, as you've mentioned, he's in that 70s show. So obviously, he's obviously not that kind of person in real life, but I guess
there's another
acting.
evil person in the 70s showcast, but we won't go into that.
Yeah. But again, to mention that death scene as well, like there's a whole deleted scene, and you only see it on the Blu-ray features, I believe, where they built a whole animatronic torso of Peter Weller, and it's only seen for about 2 seconds from the back and briefly from the front. And if you look up RoboCop behind the scenes, and you'll see it. And this animatronic is gruesome. It's got parts that blow apart, and they put it back together, and and there's this scene where it's rigged up to go backwards and writhe in pain. So it's got Peter Weller's face in this contorted thing. So not only do they put armatures underneath the face, they also armatures in the actual torso itself to have this scene of him being shot to pieces when he's on his knees. You only see it for a split second, and it's a shame that they had to take so much out for being so super violent that they wouldn't even release it in cinemas.
I'm pretty sure the director's cut. I'm fairly like you don't see it for very long, but it is very, very convincing.
Yes,
because it's sort of, you look at Peter Weller's contorted face, and then it sort of pans round to behind. And
that's the shot. That is the shot.
In the head, and the back of his head explodes. It's extremely convincing. It looks very gruesome and very real.
Yeah, that's the shot, and it's just. Yeah. I would love to see a proper version with that full scene restored, because I think I've only ever seen behind the scenes stuff of that thing where they're resetting the rig, and it looks gorgeous. And it's just such a shame that we never see much of it, because exploding heads are a bit too far, I think, for But arms and hands are absolutely fine, and being shotguns to pieces is absolutely fine, but
absolutely
not a close up of a headshot. No.
Next on the list is Ronnie Cox, who played Dick Jones, the bad dude who kind of got the RoboCop and the Ed 209, schemes up and running and trying to get one up on the old man, the leader of the corporation, so he can be the dude in charge. Effectively the bad person of, apart from Clarence, he was the next bad man of the film, but just in a different kind of style. Ronnie Cox betrayed him effectively, didn't he?
Yes.
Yeah. I think like Boddicker, but in a different way. All equally kind of uncomfortable to watch, but
corporate version of Clarence.
Yeah, he's that person that you kind of fear at work. Guy, he's the arsehole. He's the guy that's it's just, there's the bit like with Bob in the restroom, and it's just.
I was just thinking of this like that myself. Yeah.
And he grabs him by the hair. It's almost like he's kind of getting a bit handsy, and he just like grabs his hair, and he's just. Yeah, he's unstable. He's fucking unstable. He doesn't want anyone trying to walk over him. He just is driven by, power. And it's just, he's a bit of an arsehole.
Yeah, and he hires Boddicker to do his dirty work because he can't do it himself. But, you sort of get the impression that if he could do it himself, he would. He'd be fine with doing that stuff. It's just the ruthless corporate environment that he's cultivating for himself. It's a scumbag.
And of course, we couldn't talk about the cast without mentioning Nancy Allen, who played Anne Lewis, and just the heart of the film.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, she's phenomenal. I love her to bits, and I don't know,
major childhood crush on.
Oh
the character of
John.
Yeah. She's so cool. I've never really known what else she's been in. I would like to watch more stuff with her in.
The documentary I watched earlier today, she was like America's sweetheart, like kind of actress. I think she's
No,
I think she's done a bit part in like the Carrie movie, the Stephen King movie.
Oh, okay.
But I think she was just doing the rounds.
Her look in RoboCop is like very different to everything else. Like she's got long curly blonde hair, and then in RoboCop she just looks completely different to how she does everywhere else.
Beautiful.
And then they killed her character off in RoboCop 3.
That's so bad, man. You don't do that.
And I remember watching RoboCop 2 going, yeah, it's all right. But as I've gotten older, I've realised how bad RoboCop 2 is. But again, the saving grace of RoboCop 2 is the Kane robot, which is your natural progression from Ed 209 prototype to Kane. It's a glorious looking thing. And then I watched RoboCop 3 on like pirate video once around a friend's, and I was like, what the hell is this? That's not Peter Weller. What the hell is going on?
RoboCop 2 is worth it for the robot that shoots himself in the head and then the sirens go off.
I love that scene with the different like concepts.
Mm-hmm.
So fantastic. And you have to wonder almost if that's like, if they actually cycled through designs they maybe were considering for the first film.
Yeah.
I'd like to think it's a big in-joke, but...
What's that, for the cane robot?
Yeah. Oh, God,
yeah.
So good.
And again,
So good.
like, there's videos of people building a garage kit of the cane robot, and it looks stunning.
I need to watch RoboCop 2 again now.
It's a stunning piece of engineering, both Ed 209 and the cane robot. But I always remember the scene where they dismantle RoboCop and dump him outside the headquarters of the police station.
Yeah.
I always remember being more horrified at that than the body horror in the first film. I was like, but you can shoot RoboCop to shit, yeah, but he'll repair himself and he'll be fine. But to dismantle him and throw him on the ground, which is a beautiful puppet, by the way. But yeah, the sequels, let's just not talk about the sequels.
Yeah, let's leave it now. Well, let's get on to our favourite moments of RoboCop, and we've already mentioned quite a few of them, but I'm sure there's like some standout particular scenes from the film, and I'll go around each of you and we'll find them out. And let's start with Rich.
For me, it's a really, really simple moment, but I just feel like it gave me the chills in this film, and that it's a bit I touched upon earlier, but it's the bit when RoboCop basically runs through a load of Bodega's men when they're in the place where they're basically manufacturing, producing drugs. And he just goes through, he's just going on a shooting spree. It's just saying about the way that whole scene is shot, the way the score is used. It's simple, but it just works. It was the one real moment that you really felt like he was just kicking ass. And it was one of those few proper like hero moments of the film. I love it. It works on a basic level for me. It wasn't trying to be clever. It wasn't trying to be emotive, satirical. It was just badass hero moment, and I love it. And predominantly because of the score, the way it was used, the way it accompanied the action. It just, yeah. I love that moment. Again, it's very simple. It's not a lot I can really break down about it, but yeah, I just remember the first time I watched it, and even the other day when I watched the film again, I still get goosebumps from it. It's so cool.
Yeah, no, it's a cracking scene, and definitely appreciate what you're saying about it. Like you say, it's nice to be, I don't know, it's a bit of a grounding scene, isn't it? Like,
yeah, it strips it back for a moment. It just becomes a bit of a hero film. It just comes and takes out the bad guys. It's not trying to do anything more than that. And I think it was nice in a way, grounding you in just having it work on a nice base level. I love it. So
he was just pretty much doing what he was created to do.
Mm-hmm. But he's got this personal vendetta as well. He's not just going to the convenience store to stop some thug from robbing the nice couple. He's on a bit of a personal mission now, and it's so cool.
The whole film is my favourite scene, but
that's the easy way out. Yeah, come on.
It's full of just amazing mowing down, and that's why you go to watch these films, is to watch a robot shoot a bunch of shit up. To me, I think I brought it up in various episodes. I'm a stickler for the two-man play scenes where you've got a bit of a breather, and I brought it up earlier. It's to me the scene where he takes off his helmet for the first time, and we see his face as it now is, the same time as he does through a crappy piece of metal. You have fleeting moments where you see him adapting to who he now is and who he once was, but you have the full-on scene in the steel mill where he's talking to Anne Lewis, and he's having memories, bringing stuff up, and they're just both having this moment together, two partners who have entrusted each other's lives to each other, and she feels bad because she didn't let it happen, but she wasn't there in time to stop it from happening. So you've got that underlying guilt, and you've also got him almost in a way, and again, it's all down to Peter Weller's performance. He doesn't have to say anything. It's all in the eyes and the movements, where he wishes he was just dead at that moment. It's like, why did they keep me alive? Why? And it's a lovely bonding scene because he's having trouble targeting, and it's such a human scene to see this advanced robot prototype who's been pinpoint up until this point can't shoot baby food, and he's recalibrating, and it's just such a human moment between two characters, and one just happens to be 98% machine. And it's just a lovely scene, and like I said, I'm a stickler for those moments where it's like a two-man play, because it just works, and it always has done for me, because...
Gives you a bit of emotion, doesn't it?
Yeah, we all have those moments where you're questioning everything in life, and in that 5-minute scene, they're both questioning everything, where they are, how they got here, why they're there. It's just a lovely scene, and then it ramps up when they hear the cars pulling into that amazing... gruesome, grotesque finale that we have, or semi-finale. So it's like got 3 endings, this film, isn't it? But
yeah, I was gonna say, I like how he has to shoot the baby food, and I'm sure there's a bit of like anger behind that shooting as well. You know, because I'm sure he's very cross of having his own substance he can eat is baby food.
Yeah, again, it's that trope of being demoralised but not having control of that.
But then, like,
yeah, it's...
you know, the question comes into my head of, like, so he has to consume this, like, baby, like, pureed food gloop, whatever it is. And, like, surely there's waste. Is there waste? Does he have to go to the loo?
It's not mentioned in the film, but I can only assume it's a process storage in the suit. Because, obviously, he has to eat to keep the biological components alive. From what I've read or heard on documentaries is, I think the brain and the eyes and the heart and the lungs and the stomach were the only things salvageable. And they touch upon that in the remake a little bit more, in more detail. But how demoralising is it to be this cop who has to eat sludge to survive, and you're stuck in this suit? What's your lifespan? Can you kill yourself? You know? Can you end it if you... And it's getting really deep and philosophical, but it's relevant, isn't it? Like...
Oh, yeah. It's horror. It's cosmic horror.
Yeah, how long can you put up with what you've been put into when it's nothing, you had no control over it? You were just put into this machine, and you just, what do you do? And it must be horrible. And Peter Weller plays it just beautifully well.
I mean, it's difficult, right? It's hard to choose a favourite moment in this film. I almost want to say... right at the very end of the film, but I can't remember the character's name. After Dick Jones gets shot out the window, that executive just turns and gives a thumbs up. Smiles, gives a thumbs up. Amazing stuff.
I love it.
But I think it's the scene in the boardroom where they demonstrate Ed 209 and it goes wrong, right?
Yeah.
Like, please put down your weapon. You have 20 seconds to comply, and it just doesn't work. And that guy, I can't remember his name either. Kenny. Just gets fucking obliterated, and he's like running around saying help me, and nobody, like everyone's staying away from him because Ed 209 is about to blast him to pieces. And it's the Paul Verhoeven squibs. Like, the squibs are just fucking immaculate. And if you watch the director's cut, it goes on for way too long, and it's horrifying.
It's just
his body just smoking as well on top of
the scene ends, and everybody is obviously, they're like, "Oh God, that was awful!" And then someone says, "Someone call a paramedic." It's like, that would help.
I've always loved that. Was someone get a goddamn paramedic?
Yeah,
and he's more than a paramedic, but that's the joke.
But it's like
beautiful.
There's no consequences for anyone. Like, that's just the product that they were making went wrong. Back to the drawing board. We need to work out that bug, and that's it. Like, that guy died horribly, but there's no consequences. And it's horrifying and hilarious in equal measure.
Yeah, again, it was one of those awe-inspiring scenes of the film, like with our fresh, young eyes, to see that on screen. And that was a cut version, it was like, whoa. Well, my favourite scene's in the ending, so I'll touch upon that when we get into it. But before we do get to the ending of RoboCop, I just want to mention the score of the film, because it's absolutely epic, by Basil Poledouris. He has quite an illustrious career in the Hollywood films, and he's done such things as score Red Dawn, Hunt for Red October, Conan the Barbarian, Iron Eagle.
Score is god tier. I love that score.
Starship Troopers and Free Willy. I know we've got a few.
Yeah.
Wow.
But Basil here just nailed the feelings of the film perfectly, didn't he?
I can't say much more, really.
It's like an industrial theatrical score, right?
There's a real like triumphant feel to it, even though everything's shit and it's sad. But there's this real like triumphant energy to it, like RoboCop, and it just feels.
It's like a superhero score,
Yeah,
right?
so
and it's like over the top. Like RoboCop's theme is playing over the top of like the montage of him going out and quote unquote solving crime, which means making people's chest cavities fucking explode.
The guy in the dick.
With this incredible industrial score over the top. Yeah, it's brilliant. It's great.
So great.
I've always loved the score for this film. It's just, like I said, it's just so metallic and dark and hitting the nail on the head, Steve, industrial sounding, intertwined with that almost Back to the Future-esque theme for RoboCop playing underneath. It's just sublime. Even did he score the news anchor segments and the ads? Because it's such a jarring juxtaposition between this dystopian score to all of a sudden everyone's happy, buy our products.
I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if he was involved in that.
No, because I think there's a lot of, not so much a lot of red tape sometimes, but sometimes like the scoring of the inner elements of the film go to like the scenic artists or something like that, don't they? Or the outsource, I don't know, but it's just, I love it. I think it was my ringtone for a few years as well.
Awesome.
I think it was everyone's, wasn't it, at some point?
The ending of RoboCop was not a disappointment, and just as violent as the rest of the film in places. And it kind of kicks off in Steel Mill. Chris has mentioned it in his favourite moment of the film between Murphy and Anne having this like one-on-one conversation, and then of course the gang appear at the steel mill ready to find him and try and destroy him, and what ensues is just a bloodbath of like RoboCop just getting his revenge on the gang and finishing them off one by one. And this part of the ending was just, I don't know, like it was just memorizing, wasn't it? And this is like plays into where my favourite scene of the film was, because it had to be the toxic waste moment, where he does fall into the toxic waste and he's just gets out and he's just roaming around the steel mill, like melting away and like slurring and like a zombie in some ways, and then just getting mowed over by the car and just being splattered everywhere. And it's just I've watched a lot of films in my time, but that particular scene, it's just always forefront of the brain, and it's something that will never leave me, especially the first time I saw it. It's just immense.
So good.
Even now, trying to talk about it, I can't in some ways, because just the way in which they filmed it, and just the whole idea of him falling into the toxic waste and that happening, just mind blowing. But what are your guys' impressions or thoughts on the ending of that, or that section of the ending?
I share your PTSD, Jason.
See, I never had PTSD. I remember watching it as a kid going, that is fucking diabolically amazing. But what I love about it most is they didn't just do like a puppet that explodes, they put bones in it as well. So when he dissolves, you just get this multi-layered explosion of mutated toxic human. It's just sublime.
It's the way that's it. For me, it's the way the head comes off and splatters like a water balloon on the windshield. Oh my goodness.
So great.
You kind of get a mix of emotions of like you start to feel a little bit of pity on him when he's walking around erring and moaning and melting and stuff, and then your brain clicks and think, well, no, because this dude's an arsehole. He doesn't need your pity. He doesn't need your to feel sorry for him or anything. He deserves this. He deserves this ending. And you're kind of going through that kind of emotional ride too. As much, I think for me, as much as I love the this bit, my favourite bit from the whole that part of the ending is I forget the guy's name, but it's when he's in the crane cockpit and he drops all the scrap metal on RoboCop, and you get Lewis has the big fuck off gun, and you get that really just fantastic because he's just shouting out to Clarence, "Yeah, you see that? I got him!" And then she just fires off in a low angle wide shot, just the whole crane just explodes. And he's like, he's gone. Clarence just realizes shit. Just that quick shift from pure euphoria to just dead, and I love that scene. It gets a bigger laugh from me than even the bit with the meal and the toxic waste. I don't know why. It's just directed so beautifully. I love that scene. So we've briefly talked about the section where RoboCop goes to the Omni Corporation and needs to get his revenge on Dick Jones, really. And throughout the film, we see on the screen about Directive 4, and RoboCop can't quite access that information, can he? We don't really know what Directive 4 was through most of the film, but we kind of get to see that here, where he plays the video of Dick admitting the ordering of the killing of Bob Morton, and then Dick takes the old man hostage, which we get the great line of "Dick, you're fired," and RoboCop just turns around and goes, "Thank you," and then shoots the crap out of him. Fantastic. And then you get the final shot of the film, I guess, where they what do we call you, son? And he turns around and he says, Murphy, and then it kind of just cuts to the end of the film.
And then the whole theatre cheers. Yes, he's got his Murphy back.
It's a great moment, but there's no way that the old man does not know who that is. So it's a bit weird when he's like, "Nice shooting, son. What's your name?" It's like, you know who that is. Come on. But it's a great setup. It's a great setup, though, for him to just go, "Murphy." It's fantastic. It almost makes up for the incredibly long-armed Dick Jones falling out the window.
Oh, yeah. You think, with all the director's cut and the 4K and all this and that, they would have gone back and tidied that up a little bit, wouldn't you? But maybe they just left it there for...
I feel like if they did that, someone would be cross about it.
Yeah, probably.
I think wasn't it one of those cases where it was filmed by some other unit of the production?
My understanding is they couldn't afford an effects studio, so they hired individual, they hired Phil Tippett individually, and different people did different parts of the effects.
Yeah, so they subcontracted it, and I think by the time the shot was done and cleaned up and given to the editors, they were like, "Well, we can't refilm it," and they just were like, "Well, what else are we going to run then?" From the low-key death of just getting stabbed in the neck of Clarence.
Yeah. I guess we could talk about Clarence's demise, could we?
I don't know because Murphy's first initial death was so horrific, but Clarence is just so simple and to the point where it's just set up early in the film where Murphy's, it's technically what we know now as a USB key, isn't it? It's a thumb drive.
That he gets stabbed in the neck with a thumb drive.
Yeah, that he can interface with computers. It's a universal data connection. It's basically it's a thumb drive.
Yeah,
and it's just such a low-key, simple death where he just engages that data key and stabs him in the neck and lets him bleed out.
You're right, because Boddick is the kind of guy who would want to go out in a blaze of glory, right? He would almost want to die like Murphy did, because it would be a dramatic death. But yeah, you're right. It makes sense that it would piss him off just to get stabbed in the neck with a USB cable.
Just such a simple death, and it just, I don't know, it always stood out to me as fantastic. But
all that's left to do, guys, is just to give us your verdicts and final score on RoboCop.
I think, like what Steve said early on into the show, this stands as probably one of my favourite films of all time. It's easily good, top 20, top 15 material, which I know sounds low, but it's not really, considering how many films there are. I'm going to give this a nice, big, solid 9.5.
Oh, it's got to be a 10 for me again. I love everything about this film. It's, again, with a Verhoeven film, it's so delightfully simple, yet so delightfully complex in the same instant. I've just always loved it, and I always love revisiting it. And when my old action figure turns up, I'm always like, oh, fucking yeah, look at that, like, still got it. And yeah, I was just always watching it. And I remember playing, I think we said we used to play it at school on the field, you know. Who would have thought, you know, 9 or 10 year olds playing RoboCop at a primary school. But then I see what my nieces and nephew watch now, and I'm like, yeah, nothing's changed really. Nothing's really changed.
There's Chris throwing his tens around like it's nothing.
We're on to a good run this year, lads. We're on to a good run.
Yeah, we picked well.
I mean, if the listeners are wondering, like, are we just going to talk about our favourite ever films and TV shows? Excuse me. Just so we can give them really high scores. Don't worry, we do have some bad movies coming up for us to talk about, which I'm sure will not be getting very high scores. So, Steve.
I feel like me giving Top Secret a 10 is going to come back to haunt me every time you ask me this question. Because I don't necessarily regret it, but it does feel weird in hindsight that I scored Top Secret a 10. There's no way that I can give Top Secret a 10 and not give this a 10. So I fucking love this film. So I think it has to be a 10 from me.
So 10 from Steve, 10 from Chris, and a 9.5 from Rich.
Trying to be different.
Sure. Don't worry.
Not so predictable.
It's not getting a 10 from me, so don't worry about that.
Just on the Ronnie Cox puppet's arms alone, Jason, yeah?
Yeah. RoboCop is a film, to me, of like the first time I've seen such a film, and it's left such a mark on me for those particular scenes, but just for the story in itself. And I always kind of label Star Trek as being like the forefront of me getting into science fiction. But I think I have to give RoboCop some credit for that as well, because I'm sure I saw RoboCop before I started watching Star Trek. And with such its like science fiction themes and connections, this must be one of my first experiences that I really enjoyed of the science fiction genre. That I have to give it credit for that on its own, as well as the great special effects and the great acting from Peter and from Kirkwood. That it does eclipse lots and lots of films for me. It's not, it's one of my favourite films, definitely. It's not my favourite film, which will obviously get reflected in my score. But yeah, it's such a, I don't know, like in some ways I wish there wasn't sequels to RoboCop. I wish it was just a standalone kind of film, because the RoboCop on its own is just this special thing that exists that can't be touched, it can't be matched. Even the RoboCop remake did a good job of it, but it just didn't have that Paul Verhoeven kind of touch to it, which obviously the original does, and that it's just an untouchable thing, really, and it should just have been left where it was.
Yeah. Would you say, Jason, that the film did its job and it should have been left alone, but because, they needed more profit, they had to bring it back and bring it back to life? And
but capitalist kind of...
making the capitalist Hollywood money, and then not understanding what the film was about in the first place.
Sure.
We've seen this many times before.
Yep.
So yeah, my score for RoboCop will be 9.6. So with my 9.6 added to the guy's scores, RoboCop comes in at nice 39.1, which eclipses Speed's 36.5 and puts it nicely at number 2 on our board from above. So let's get it on there.
Nice.
There it is, number 2. Will anything top Secret?
Can only hope not.
Maybe there is. I can think of one film that might. I know it's the film that I would give a 10 to. One day, hopefully, we'll recover it and find out what that is. All the time we have for this week. A massive thank you as always for everyone joining us. If you would like to donate to the show, then please visit our coffee page where you can show your support starting from just a £1. Come and join us in our Discord server to discuss the topics we cover on the podcast, films, TV, video games, and much more. Link can be found in the show description or on our website. And speaking of the website, please give it a visit. We have articles, game reviews, my entire back catalogue of episodes, and more at thewolfiepod.com. Chaps, it's time to say goodbye.
Thank you for your cooperation. Yeah. Bye.
Bitches leave.
And the finale of this podcast was brought to you by Sunblock 5000.
Oh dear, my name is B. Jason, and you've been listening to What's Wrong with Wolfie, a retro podcast to the max. We'll catch you guys later. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. See ya.
What's wrong with Wolfie? I can hear him barking.